Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. Well, we are releasing a bonus episode today because we got a really cool Paesani Tale from Alexander. And it's a summary of his great-grandfather, Crescenzo Vigliotta's life. So we just thought we would go ahead and share this story and release it as a bonus episode. So, Alexander, we really appreciate you sending this in, and we're so excited to share your great-grandfather's story.
Yeah, thank you.
So this summary was not actually written by Alexander. It was written by a Paul Vigliotta, and Paul is Crescenzo's grandson. So here is Crescenzo's story. On September 14th, 1894, Crescenzo Vigliotta, my grandfather, was born the eldest of 4 children to Angelo Marino Vigliotta and Maria Di Chiara in a little village called Bonita, Italy, about 70 miles from Naples. In 1896, his sister Alessandra was born but died when she was 9 years old. In 1909, Crescenzo's brother Joe was born. Around 1950 or so, Joe tried to come to America but could not, so instead he moved to Canada where he raised his family. In 1910, at age 16, Crescenzo left for America because, as he put it, there was no opportunity and I wanted to improve and have a better life. Life was tough in Italy at that time. In those days, you needed a sponsor to come to America. Crescenzo wanted to come to America so badly that he forged his father's signature and wrote his cousins in America asking for passage money. When Crescenzo's father found out, he was angry. But realizing how much his son wanted to go to America, he eventually gave Crescenzo some money, telling him to put it in the small pocket of his pants near his belt loop and said, never use it except in an emergency. Crescenzo never needed to. As Crescenzo was leaving, his father said, I know that if you go to America, I will never see you again. He never did. In 1911, his youngest brother Ernie was born. Ernie eventually moved to Argentina where he raised his family. Crescenzo never met his brother Ernie until 1962 when the 3 brothers got together in Patchogue, New York and met for the first time. Crescenzo was 68 years of age and Ernie was 51. Crescenzo traveled with his friend Vincenzo Ferragamo, who obtained a traveling sponsor, a woman with 4 children going to America to be with her husband. In Naples, she was refused passage because her youngest boy had a problem with his eyes. So Crescenzo and Vincenzo switched lines. When asked for their sponsor, they said she was already on board. They were let on and told to hurry and catch up to her. It was a 10.5-day boat ride, considered very fast in those days, when it could have taken up to 16 days. Crescenzo remembers going to New Jersey to a big hall filled with thousands of people coming and going, probably Ellis Island. He first lived with the Ferragamo family. The Ferragamos were brothers. One became a priest in the Montfront community. He went to school with Crescenzo in Italy. The other became a doctor. He first worked as a hand sewer at a shoe shop. One day when a fellow worker was out, Crescenzo had to do his job also, and did it better than the regular worker. The boss didn't want Crescenzo to know how good he was doing. When he found this out, he quit the next day, realizing that they would not increase his pay and he could not advance to that job. After that, Crescenzo moved to Tuckahoe near Irvington across from the Tappan Zee Bridge, where he lived with his cousins. He got a job in a factory making raincoats and trousers for the army. Crescenzo married his first wife during this time. Her name was Rose. She died 6 months after they were married. They had worked together in the raincoat factory and lived in a 3-room apartment on Park Avenue in Brooklyn. Crescenzo also worked with Steve Danza, a friend in the raincoat factory. After a while, he asked Steve to help him meet someone. He wanted to get married again. Steve brought Crescenzo to a christening to meet a certain young lady, but instead he became interested in Steve's sister, Angelina Danza. They were married 6 months later. Crescenzo was 24 years old and Angelina was 22. They were married on February 10th, 1918 at Our Lady of Peace on Carroll Street in Brooklyn. Their first residence was 2nd Avenue, Brooklyn, between 4th and 5th Avenue. Mary, their first child, was born there on December 3rd, 1918. Crescenzo worked in the factory and also made raincoats at night on a sewing machine in the hallway on the first floor of their apartment building. From 1920 to 1929, they lived in their second residence on 16th Street, Brooklyn. Here, Crescenzo and Angelina ran a grocery store and a delivery truck business. Crescenzo worked with Angelina's father, Gaetano Danza. He delivered chocolate, spaghetti, laundry, olive oil, and sometimes booze to Long Island and brought laundry and eggs back to the city. During one stop, while Crescenzo had gone upstairs to make a delivery, he came down to find a policeman looking over his truck. The policeman asked what was in the gallon cans, and he replied, olive oil. The policeman decided to check one can and found that it was in fact olive oil. Thank God, Crescenzo thought. Somehow he got the policeman over to a light to look at his license to try to get him away from the truck, and it worked. The policeman let him go. Crescenzo had been carrying booze in some of those cans that day. Crescenzo and Angelina had 6 more children while living on 16th Street. Mario, born June 14th, 1920. Emily, born September 3rd, 1921. Tommy, born April 5th, 1923. Ernie, born December 11th, 1924. The first Albert, born March 1926, and Father Bill, born October 19th, 1927. The first Albert died of appendicitis. During 1929, they moved the 3rd time to Manorville, Long Island. The reason for the move was due to the stock market crash. After the crash, Crescenzo and his real estate partner, Peppino, found themselves broke. All they had left were their properties. They decided to go their separate ways and divided up the property. Peppino took the property they owned in Brooklyn. Crescenzo took the property they owned in Manorville and moved the family there to Eastport Manor Road. The second Albert was born there. Elisa was also born there in 1930. She was the only child of all the children born in a hospital. All the other children were born at home in Brooklyn. In 1931, the first Crescenzo Jr. was also born there. Crescenzo hunted pheasant while living in Manorville and got lost in the woods on one occasion. Crescenzo made a deal with Pelco Patchogue Electric Company, now LIPA. He paid for the poles for electricity from Montauk Highway to his property on Eastport Manor Road. He was reimbursed with electricity as he needed it. They were the first to get electricity on their street. Crescenzo was so broke that at one point he took a suitcase, bought some things at the 5 and 10 store, and sold them on the train. While living in Manorville, Mary, Mario, and Emily made their confirmation all together at St. John the Evangelist Church in Center Moriches. Boy Scouts used to come and stay in the tents on the property in the summertime. A man named Curious, and in parentheses that says Greek, so hopefully I pronounced that right, was the scoutmaster. He also had 4 bungalows which accommodated 2 families each that he rented out to people for the summer. He also sold off small pieces of the property, approximately 20 feet by 100 feet, to people who wanted to own a piece of land in the country. He called this future development Lindenberg Heights and named one of the streets in it Bonito Boulevard, after the village he came from in Italy. He also had a restaurant on the property. They cooked on gas or kerosene. The restaurant was to feed the people that rented the bungalows and the scouts. Crescenzo put in a pool on the property for all children and probably for the scouts too. It is still there today. On the day they all left the property for the last time, Ernie still remembers looking back at his dog that they couldn't take with him as they drove away from the house. He still feels badly about having to leave him. The house, we believe, lay empty until 1954 when Alex Mazurkis bought it. Their 4th move was back to their first house on Carroll Street in Brooklyn. Their 5th move was to East 8th Street, Brooklyn. Sonny died there of pneumonia at 1.5 years old. In those days, the body in the funeral service was at the home, not at a funeral parlor. As was the custom, they put a wreath on the door with a lavender ribbon on it. At around the same time, Elisa got pleurisy and had to be taken away in the ambulance. Ernie, Crescenzo's son, recalls his father being so distraught, having to bite down on a handkerchief after he had just heard that Sonny had died, and now Elisa was being taken away in an ambulance. Their 6th move was to 9th Street between 4th and 5th Avenue in Brooklyn. They had a restaurant on the 1st floor, a dance hall on the 2nd floor, and they lived on the 3rd floor. Dinner, dances, and parties were held on the 2nd floor. Tina and her twin Amelia were born here on July 5th, 1933. The restaurant was called the Italian-American Restaurant. The fire code required fire escapes from the 2nd floor windows. Crescenzo had to install these fire escapes, but the owner of the building would not pay for them. He thought that the owner of the building should have to put them in, so he stopped paying the rent in order to recover the cost. Then one day, when some of the children came home from school, they came home to see all the furniture out on the sidewalk. They had been evicted. All the equipment from the restaurant was in the street too. Emily remembers having to stay with the furniture while Crescenzo found them a place to live. For a short time, they lived on 10th Street and 5th Avenue, Brooklyn, above the Loft Candy Store. They had a restaurant there also. This was their 7th move. Their 8th move was to 1st Street and 5th Avenue, Brooklyn. Jean was born here on January 6, 1935. Marjorie was born here also on May 19, 1937. Crescenzo was in the egg business now with a delivery truck. Emily graduated from 8th grade in 1935. That summer, she got tuberculosis. Emily graduated from St. Thomas Aquinas Grammar School. She never went to high school. She was in and out of the hospital and then in a sanitarium for 11 months. After this, around 1937, Crescenzo decided Emily needed to live out in the country, so they moved for the 9th time to Bethpage, Long Island. Emily had to go to the hospital in the city once a week to get a fluoroscope, similar to an X-ray today, to check her lungs. Chris, the last child, was born in Bethpage on January 23, 1939. It was a much more luxurious house than they had ever had before. Mary, the eldest child, married John Bellini in July of 1940. She was 21. World War II broke out while they lived in Bethpage. Up until now, Crescenzo's whole workforce had been his oldest 3 sons, Mario, Tommy, and Ernie. The business name was C. Vigliotta and Sons Incorporated. Hoping to keep his boys out of the war, he decided to buy a 5-acre duck farm in 1941 on Bay Avenue, the first of 4. They moved for the 10th time to Atlantic Avenue in Patchogue in the summer of 1943 to be closer to the farm. However, it didn't work. Mario didn't get drafted because he had a punctured eardrum. Tommy and Ernie, knowing they were going to be drafted, enlisted. Ernie enlisted in the Marines, Tommy in the Air Force. Neither of them ever left the United States for combat, even though their whole battalion went. We attribute this fact to the power of prayer. While in Patchogue, they also had a restaurant called Mama Vig's on Sunrise Highway in Islip. They also had a poultry stand in the garage in the back of the big house, as we called it. Albert ran the poultry business there and did deliveries. It was a large piece of property in Patchogue, and they had an orchard with apples and pear trees, strawberries, and corn. Angelina became ill in the early 1950s. She had multiple lateral sclerosis. William, the 6th oldest, was ordained a priest on March 13, 1954 in Litchfield, Connecticut. We all call him Father Bill now. Angelina's condition grew progressively worse over the years and died on April 22, 1959 at 63 years of age. Crescenzo married for the 3rd time to Angelina's sister Carmen on May 7, 1961. Carmen had previously lost her husband. Both were alone and needed to be taken care of, so it was a marriage of convenience. Sometime between 1953 and 1957, Crescenzo went back to the property in Maynardville and tried to reclaim it, but because of the way he had sold it off in small pieces, it was almost impossible to get it back. He wanted to get some property in Maynardville to raise ducks because it was becoming increasingly more difficult to raise them. Father Charist from the Montfort missionaries asked Ernie if he knew of any land available because he wanted to build a shrine. Ernie said that he was sure his father could help. When presented with the idea, Crescenzo replied, "How much do you want?" He ended up donating the 70 acres he had originally purchased for the duck farm to Montfort missionaries for a shrine to honor Mary, the Mother of God. It is called the Shrine of Our Lady of the Island, dedicated on October 2nd, 1976. In 1971, Crescenzo bought a second 32-acre duck farm on Montauk Highway in East Moriches from Stanley Ojeka. He started to take a less active role in the business at this time and changed the name of the business to Vigliotta Brothers Incorporated. He still came to work every day and did carpentry around the farms and other odd jobs. At this point, the 3 sons and their sons were running the business. They also had a poultry business called Vigliotta Poultry Products and made deliveries to restaurants around the islands. They delivered eggs, butter, chickens, and ducks. In 1974, Vigliotta Brothers Incorporated purchased 2 more 15-acre duck farms on Bay Avenue in East Moriches from John Leary. This made a total of 4 duck farms called North, South, East, and West Farms. On July 24th, 1977, they bought Terrace Service Station on Montauk Highway in East Moriches from Otto and Edna Gehrig. On March 9th, 1984, Crescenzo Vigliotta died at the age of 89 after being sick for about a week or so. He worked every day and cut his own lawn into his 80s. In 1985, the second duck farm on Montauk Highway, East Moriches, was sold and is now a condominium. A little while after that, one of the farms on Bay Avenue was sold to Roger Titmus Duck Farms. Sometime after this, the three brothers retired, leaving the business to their sons. Unfortunately, with a decrease in demand for Long Island ducks and an increase in the cost of feed and processing, the duck business on Long Island began to disappear one at a time. Finally, in 1996, Vigliotta brothers took their last load of ducks to the city. The two farms on the Bay Avenue are now closed. The gas station is also closed and is for sale. Most of the sons have gone into other businesses, but the family still remains very close, meeting once a month for birthdays and having family reunions and get-togethers regularly. Crescenzo leaves behind 15 children, 11 still living, 58 grandchildren, and 133 great-grandchildren and counting. Crescenzo, the youngest of the 15, keeps track of the total of great-grandchildren on his computer and has to update it quite regularly. Crescenzo was a man of vision. He saw things others did not. He had the ability to start over when things were at their worst. He had many failures, but was always a success. He was a religious man and always believed in God. His faith grew stronger when he met Angelina. They set an example for their children and their children's children. Crescenzo left his impact on America through his love and devotion to his children and God through the Blessed Mother. In his own words, God is good, God is love. What a great story. He lived a truly fulfilling life. And then of those great-grandchildren.
Oh, I know. I can't believe that number.
Yeah.
That's a big family.
It's huge. Like, what, 133?
Yeah, that's
right.
Right.
And he really, like, at the end when, talking about how he was able to start over, he truly was. He just never gave up.
Right.
So
very interesting.
Very cool. And again, Alexander, thank you so much for sending that in to us. We really enjoyed reading it.
Yes, thank you.
And if anybody else wants to send in a Paesani Tale, our email address is itamstories@gmail.com. We would love to read your family story and send it out for the world to hear.
Yeah.
They're pretty fun. But stay tuned for tomorrow. We will be releasing a full episode, and we hope you enjoyed this bonus Paesani Tale. See you later.
See you later.